Okay, so now that we're starting to go through recruitment and selection, we've had all the things about we're going to advertise, we've thought about where it needs to be, we've come up with a fairly decent job ad, we've filled in all the blanks before, and now we're moving to the process of actually getting the right person. Now remember, this isn't just about you're working in a business or working for a business or developing a business and hiring a staff member or employee. This can also apply just as equally to contractors, to freelancers, or anyone else you're going to work with, okay? So a lot of these principles are exactly the same. So even if you're never thinking, you know, oh look, I'm a freelancer and I roam around by myself, at some point you're going to need help, and you need to make sure you're doing it the right way and getting the right person to do the job for you, particularly if you're a freelancer or something, because if you get the wrong person and they stuff up, then guess what that does to your timeline? It blows you way out, okay? And you have even less flexibility to catch up. So you've got to be right on top of your processes. So to break down the process, really it all comes down to stages, okay? So at some point you made the decision to recruit, okay? And all we're saying there is, okay, at some point you needed to go, do I really need that extra person? Do I have the budget? Do I have the time? You know, is there the need, etc.? And we came to the conclusion that yes, there is. Now that we've thought about the decision, we need to think about, well, what is our selection criteria? Okay, so in other words, on what basis are we going to pick a person? If we've got a bunch of applicants in front of us, what are the key things we're saying is, yep, that's the person that gets the job versus that person. So what are we saying exactly is the criteria we're choosing on? Is it a level of job skill? Is it previous experience? Okay, what are the key things that we're saying are going to make it up? You know, we can rate them 1 to 10 or do whatever way you want to go about it. We'll talk on those later, most likely. And the next thing that we do is, once we've got a criteria, we do a review. Okay, and what we're starting to review there is the applications, right? So as the applications are coming in, okay, we're already starting to go against our selection criteria and say, these are the applicants coming in. Do they measure up to our selection criteria? If we said we wanted someone with 3 to 5 years experience, does this applicant have 3 to 5 years experience? Yes, they do. Awesome, straight on the short pile. No, they don't. Look, we'll put it aside. Don't put it in the bin. Hold on to it until the end. Make sure, okay? Because at some point you might say, look, I'm not sure about those people, or something interesting might occur later on in the process and you want to come back to an applicant, all right? So we're holding everything. Remember that. We want to keep these things for years, put it all in there and keep it tidy as a night parcel of information, okay? This stuff has value to you, even if you don't pick them now. You could find they're relevant, quite relevant for another job you have coming up, and you might call back and say, hey, look, this job, no, but what about that one? Okay, so it's valuable stuff. Don't just reject it and throw it in the bin. Okay, the next thing we do is once we've got our shortlist, we want to get them in for an interview. Okay, so we're going to start the interview process at this stage, and that is when we're calling our shortlist of applicants to bring them in. Now, the interview can be a pre-phone interview, followed by a longer phone interview, followed by a face-to-face, particularly if you've got a lot of people and you want to conserve your time. You don't want to bring everyone in for the whole thing, particularly if you've got a large list of applicants. As I said, you know, I had a position we advertised, you had 70 people apply. I'm certainly not going to interview 70 people. Even the list of people who were, you know, qualified at that stage, even that was 30 people long that I was totally happy with. 30 interviews, an hour each, you'd spend nothing but an entire week interviewing people and you just lose track of your mind, okay? Don't do that. You want to probably interview your final, you know, maybe 5. After a couple of phone interviews, maybe a get to know you session, maybe an information session, your choice of how you do it. Once we've gone through the interview and we think we've got the right person, that's when we might double check our referees, okay? So a referee check, always worthwhile. Now referees, it's always a bit of a mixed bag because when we think about it, who did they nominate as the referee? Probably the manager they last worked with that liked them. Might not always be the current one, could be their friend, could even be a family member, okay? So, you know, look, the strength of referees, it's open to debate in my opinion, take what you want from it, but just understand it is not a fail-safe and it most absolutely is not an opportunity for you to push the responsibility for the decision-making onto some third person that you don't know, okay? So you take that as a guide, it's not written in stone, all right? Ring them up, find out who they are, is it appropriate, etc. You know, as I say, it could be their cousin for all you know, so just think carefully on it and make sure you make your decision accordingly. And the last thing we do is just double check the qualifications. Okay, so at that stage, before we say yay, we're on, just make sure that if you said they had to have a driver's license, that they in fact do have it and they show you it. Okay, don't just take their word for it. Great, if you could just bring your original documents, that would be fantastic. Okay, it's just that final check that anything that is required or they've said they've got that we know they're supposed to have, that they in fact do have, okay? So they didn't just make it up on the application form, because sometimes that happens too. Unfortunately, we don't live in a world where everyone is completely 100% dead honest. Okay, cool, so just think about that. The next one that we need to think about is at that point, we come out with a letter of offer. Okay, so this is where we say to them, thank you very much, we'd love to offer you the position. We do not say, congratulations, you have the job. That has not actually happened, okay? What we're saying to them is, we would like to offer you the role, all right? So there's an offer letter. What they need to do is actually accept the position, because they might have actually been looking somewhere else. So, we want to make the offer to them. They will either choose to take it or reject it. Now, the problem is that we need to save our letters of rejection until we've got the letter of offer confirmed from the original person. So don't tell everyone, yep, thank you very much, I've picked this guy, nice try, because if this person doesn't work out, this male, female, whatever, if they don't work out, you need to go back to a person you just wrote a letter to saying sorry and say, oh, sorry, you're our number 2 pick, do you want to come back? Okay, that's an embarrassing position, don't get into it. So make sure that once you've made your timely and swift decision, you're putting a letter of offer out there, you've got an absolute time frame for when they need to come back to you and how quickly to say yes, they're in, or no, they're not. If they're in, fantastic, we get it signed off. Once they've signed off, then we send out the correspondence to everyone else saying, thank you very much for applying. We appreciate the fact that you did. Unfortunately, this occasion, the position's gone to someone else, but we'll keep your details on board, whatever you want to do, whichever way you want to put it. But make sure that that sorry letter doesn't go out before you have this confirmed, all right? Otherwise, embarrassment for you. Okay, then this person moves into a period of induction. Okay, so that initial induction and probation, okay, okay, that's also where they're starting to get their orientation and training, okay? This is where you bring them into the place, they begin working for you, they spend a little bit of time, a probationary period, 3 months, typical. It can go to 6, there are legal requirements on that, so think carefully. But in the first 3 months, particularly if they're working full time, that's on there. Obviously, if they're under a different arrangement, you need to make sure you're covering your legalities depending on how you're employing them. But this is where you're definitely carrying out the induction, the orientation of your company. They begin working for you, you're reviewing it, etc. And then lastly, once you've completed all that and they're away and everything's going on, you're just reviewing the process, okay? So when you're talking about reviewing the process, what you look at is, once this was done, how did it go? We started with the decision to make go through the job, and we're actually moving our way through it. Did the interviews work okay? When we did the referee checks, were they relevant? Okay, because what we're trying to do is finesse the process so the next time we run a job ad or the next time we undertake hiring people, we try and work out were there any problems with any of this. Did all our interviewees know where to go? Did they all get asked the same questions? Did we check referees for everybody? Did we make sure that the letter of offers went smoothly, okay? So that review of process is just checking your own internal process to make sure you're perfectly happy with the way it works. Did we get the right number of applicants? Were the applicants we did get, were they the right applicants? Did they all turn up knowing what they were supposed to turn up at the interview, or were they confused about what the job was, okay? So anything that we noted that we didn't like and we weren't really sure about, this is a good time to look at all those different steps and say what worked, what didn't, what can we do different next time to make this a smoother, better, faster process so we can ensure we're getting the right people into the right job in the right time frame so they can do the right work as quickly and smoothly as possible. Awesome. Okay, so moving on from there, we've talked a lot about getting the right people in the right jobs, and we've talked very much on the basic level of A person, A space. The next thing we need to really think about for our organisation, or another thing to think about in recruitment rather, is to start to look at the bigger picture. Okay, particularly if we're looking at running a large business, we need to start thinking about not in terms of individuals and individual jobs, but actually what our workforce looks like. Okay, and what we're talking about for the workforce is we're talking about everybody who works for us. Okay, we're trying to get a bit of a picture and trying to shape a bit of how this works and what's going on. So the first thing we start to look at is we need to understand, well, what's the average age of our employees? Okay, so what we're saying is not that employee there, but actually if we calculate across it, what are the age breakups? Okay, so we can start to look at our workforce and where that's going. We need to also think about ethnicity. Okay, so we start to think about what's the ethnicity of our workforce. Okay, are we achieving diversification? Or are we looking at a monoculture? Is everyone basically the same, or are we starting to spread out so we can take advantage of diversity within our workforce and make sure we're getting the right people in the right jobs? If they're young, are they just job starters who are out there, and we've got a lot of young people who are going to need a lot of coaching and development to assist them get the most out of their career? Or are they older people who are maybe moving to retirement and they're looking at different flexibilities, maybe for lifestyle, whatever, okay? So they're not giving you absolute guidance, but they're starting to give a bit of a shape about, how am I supposed to be looking at these people, and, what might I be looking to offer them? The other thing is I need to look at the experience of my workforce. Okay, do I have a fairly experienced workforce, or are they sort of not as experienced? If they're not as experienced, I need to start thinking about training programs and development programs. If they're fairly experienced, I need to make sure they're not getting bored and that I'm providing them challenge. Okay, so there's a little bit of a mix there. And also I need to think about gender. Okay, so what's the gender balance of my workforce? What does that mean for me? Do I need to diversify there as well? Do I need to change that up? Have I got, a whole lot of men or a whole lot of women? And regardless of which I have, how do I broaden that and make sure that everyone's got an equal opportunity? Are we seen as particularly gender stereotyping? And just making sure that we're covering ourselves there, and what might come off the back of that. We need to also think about, other types of differences. And what I'm talking about with other types of differences there is we're starting to look at, are there different personality types? So sometimes you can do some personality testing of your workforce to see, well, do we have a lot of extroverts? Do we have a lot of introverts? What type of people do we have working for us? How do they like to communicate? How do they like to learn? What are the different working styles they might have? What are the special different needs that they may have? Okay, so this is where we start to look at that broader thing. Do we have a lot of people who want to work from home? Do they want a job share? Do they want to, what is it that they want to do? So we need to start thinking about what our current position looks like, and also our ideal position in the future about what we'd like to see. Okay, the other thing is we might need to start thinking about, do we have certain qualifications? Okay, so we need to have targets on, qualifications, capabilities, or attributes. Okay, so quals and capability. Because what we need to know is if we've got a skill set that's the past, how are we going to set up the skill set that's about the future? What future qualifications do we need people to have to support the business later on? Okay, so if things are changing, becoming more high tech, we need to make sure our workforce is keeping up with it. Because if they don't, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a lot of people out of step, and we're going to need new skills, and how we're going to get those, or where we're going to get them. So this is where we start to think about what we want to do with these people and how we want to recruit new blood in, or bring in new people with the new skills we want, or start to build that within the organization, okay? And then obviously, once we've got that, we line up our recruitment policies, okay, to try and encourage what we need. We're trying to encourage certain age groups, maybe trying to encourage certain ethnicities to come on board, experience, gender, that sort of stuff. So I know there's a lot of industries that have been seen as very predominantly male or masculine industries, and they've decided that, hey, look, that's really out of step with the broader community. How do we try and invite maybe more women into that workforce? Now, that's not to say that we're discriminating, saying men can't apply or anything like that, or denying anyone the opportunity. What we're saying is we want to have an organisation that is taking on board everything the community has to offer, and not just creating a business for one type of people. Same, the banking industry, very heavily aimed at women, particularly in the retail network. So, sometimes it'd be, just to get that gender balance there as well, is maybe, people don't think it as secretarial or women's work, or all that sort of stuff, that the baggage that people put on it. Okay, we want to have everyone have an opportunity at that job, and not gender stereotype or push people down a certain way. So you might need to think about your recruitment strategies across the workforce and how you might want to shape that. All right, great. So that's just some of your basic considerations there as we move forward. Okay, so look, some of the considerations then we need to make, just general considerations. And some of this is a little bit funky and strange, but when we start to think about, the bigger picture of how we're employing people, less than 10%. Less than 10% of companies start thinking about the big picture for the job. Okay, so they're not really thinking about how the job fits in to what's going on in the organisation. What's happening is that generally people are just seeing a need and filling the need. They're not sort of going, well, how does it fit? What's going to take place? How does this job fit in the overall organisational mix? They're just going, look, we need an immediate demand or an immediate need. Let's just hire for that. okay? They're not sort of thinking about what they want that job to achieve in the bigger picture at all, or where it's going to go. The other thing is they don't think about the environment. Okay, I'm not just talking about trees and rivers, I'm talking about the environment that job's going to go into. They're not really thinking about, well, once I add that person, what's going to happen in that space? How does it change the dynamic? And also, what is the space we're putting that person into? Do they really want to go into that? Okay, so we're not really thinking those things through at all. They don't think about the organizational culture. Okay, so when you start adding people, if you've got a team already existing, those people will know each other. All right, if you've got a space that's operating in a certain way, when you add someone to that, it's going to immediately change the dynamic. And you've got to make sure that you're getting the person who's going to also be able to gel and work with the team. Okay, it's really good you've got this new happy person, but if they can't actually fit in with the organizational fit, then sometimes you've got a good person, a right person, who's got the wrong team to work with, and that can create disunity and disharmony. So sometimes you need to think about what sort of person is going to be able to work with that team. Not that you always let the existing people dictate how everything's going to go. This is, at the end of the day, your business to run, but you need to think about, well, what effect is that person going to have? If I've got a bunch of really out there, very personality-driven people and I put a really quiet person in the mix, what's going to happen? Or if I work in a space where everyone's very quiet and it's very relaxed, and I put this absolute firecracker of a person in there, what's going to happen next? Okay, so that can create a bit of disharmony. So I need to think about how I'm going to manage that. Right? That's how I'm going to manage it. They don't really think about that. The next thing they don't really think about is how does it operate as a work group, which is pretty much as above. Okay, so how does it fit into not only the culture, but how the job actually functions? So if these people are all working together, how's this job going to fit to them? Okay, how are we doing the reporting, or is the person just sort of floating around on their own? And we also need to think about our supervisors and managers who actually have to manage that person. Okay, it's really not cool or not really good enough to say, by the way, happy day, welcome to Monday, here's a new staff member, they're here to do this, carry on, okay? We need to make sure that we're actually thinking about, well, who's going to manage that person, who's going to supervise them, who do they go to for help? And this is the sort of thing that organisations don't do, okay? They go out, they fish around for people, they throw people into a gap, and then no one has any fun at all. Terrible way of doing business. They also don't recruit in the right, the methodology, okay? So what's happening there is that they're not necessarily recruiting in the right situation, all right? They're doing it on demand. I'm in a hurry, there was no anticipation, I've just run out, get me a person and throw them in there quickly. Okay, and what happens is if we put ourselves in that situation, it's very hard to make sure we're getting the right person at the right time. We're just feeling to fit, get rid of the emergency, put out the bushfire. Problem is you're not really allowing yourself the fullness of the process to make sure you're getting the right person, so all sorts of things go funky. Okay, they're also not necessarily thinking about what the candidate adds. Okay, because once again, they're just filling a role. They're not sort of looking at the candidate and saying, well, this candidate can offer our organisation a whole bunch of things. All they're saying is, get in that job. Okay, I know what the job is I want to do. You sort of vaguely fit that box, get in the box. Not, okay, well, you're a person with a whole range of skills and attributes. Not only can you do this, but what else can you do? They're just, the immediate demand is all they're really looking at, and that's just a killer, a total waste of this person's time quite often. Okay, so, what that's going to kill is motivation. Okay, they're not looking at motivation, the motivational factor behind, well, why is that person joining the organisation? Because they're just going, look, I need a person to get in the box. So they're not really looking at what that person wanted to get out of the journey. Everyone just assumed it was the job. It's actually not often about the job. Sometimes it's about career progression, sometimes about learning, sometimes about they want to, they came to you because you got this great thing, but they're never going to see that because you just put them off to do something else. Okay, so you can get a bit out of step. Career values. Okay, so what the person wants to get out of their career, that can become a problem too. Those career values and what they were trying to get out of it, we're also not thinking about when we look at that, the learning style. Okay, so what happens is the candidate comes, we've got one way of doing business, we've got one way of training, we just throw you in and you've got the one way. Okay, we're not sort of looking at that person saying, well, who are they, how do they learn, or what's going to be the best way of dealing with them. And look, it becomes really evident when you're dealing with people, okay? It's not rocket science, it's pretty easy to work out. You can see a person, look, They're learning because this is a better mentor for them. So having a little bit of social awareness, talk to the person for a minute and start to get that little bit of feedback and information, and you start to work out what's going to be the best way of coaching and developing them. Okay, it can be a little bit different. Some people like to go away with little books and read. Some people like to talk to a person, etc. So that's when we start to talk about, what's their working style, what's their learning style, what's their general aptitude, how quickly can they learn. All right, all these things are absolutely vital. And so many companies don't do it. They just pay it off. They just go, here's a gap, there's the person, put the person in the gap, job done, and they're off for tea and coffee and scones, and really aren't maximizing this to any level, which just leads to a lot of dissatisfaction, wrong people, wrong job, and it's just such a waste of an opportunity. It's criminal. Anyway, cool. If you consider those things, you'll be a rock star, you'll get the right people, and they'll really enjoy working with you. So make sure you get that right. Cool. Okay, so through all that, we've now got the right people, we've had our considerations, we've thought about our process, okay? We don't just go out and recruit into space. We make sure we're getting the right people in the right job, and we've made all our considerations. One of the other considerations that we start to talk about is qualification and certification. Okay, different jobs obviously have different qualifications and different certifications they require. If you're in transport, etc., obviously you're going to need things like driver's licenses. You've got to make sure you get everything out there. If you're a doctor, obviously you're registered and able to practice medicine, whatever it happens to be. So we need to make sure that we're factoring that in when we're advertising the job and when we're hiring for the job. Because the job requirements often there's legislation that actually prescribe what are requirements of those jobs. So we need to make sure we're finding out what that is, making sure we're incorporating it into what we're doing, and making sure that we're checking the person has those qualifications. All right, so there are legal definitions behind some jobs. If you say doctor, it means something. If you say policeman, it means something. Okay, you can't call a job something that actually already has an official meaning. Same, if there is actually already an official definition, we can't call it something else. Right? So these are just things that we need to go out and find out, well, what's required? If they're going to do a certain function, does that have a definition? And does that definition come with qualifications and certifications that they must have? If you're in the security industry and you say it's a security guard, they must have a security license. But what you can't say is they're a customer service person who happens to do security, because that's, by the way, a security guard. And if they are that, then they need to be licensed in your various state through the various licensing agencies. So you can't call it something else and get it to do that job to get around the certification process. Got to make sure that's really tight. Okay, so it's not necessarily a limitation. Okay, no one's limiting you or anything like that. All they're saying there is that there's a specific set of guidelines to follow. Okay. And it just tells you what you need to have and what they need to have, and make sure that you've got a really clear and equal position of what they're expected to do. Okay, so you're not putting them in trouble by putting them to a job they're not licensed to do. You're not getting yourself into trouble by not getting licensed staff, and you're just following the guidelines for the position to make sure you got the, once again, right person, the right job with the correct qualifications and certifications. Okay, so the government will certainly be involved in that. Okay, or the industry body, whatever it happens to be. So you've got to think about your rules and regulations. And this is across the entire process, not just that bit, but thinking about it generally. There are government laws and regulations that come into how you're hiring people and what they're doing. Whether they're contractors, whatever it is, you might have those laws. If you just got a contractor, you might need to think about if they're only working for you and they do too much work for you, that they might start to look like an employee under law, even though you've hired them out in a different way. Okay, so you need to be really mindful about how you're employing people, and just double check to make sure that you're safe. Okay, those rules are constantly changing, the regulations are constantly changing, so looking at them today, they can change for some time in the future. So you need to sort of stay abreast of what's happening. Once again, places like Fair Work Australia, relevant trade unions, industry bodies, they can certainly give you good information about what's changing, so keep an eye on that. Department of Education, Employment and Workplace Relations, DUA, they're another body there that can also give you that information, so make sure you're staying abreast of it, all right? And just make sure that you're up to date and up to speed. All right, so make sure that you've gone through, you've looked at all your people, as we said, you've gone through your job ad, you've made sure you've got all the different parts of what you want, who's the right person for the right job, right place, right time. You've thought about any prerequisites that the person requires. So, you know, do you have qualified applicants when they're coming through? Are they the right people for the job? You've got some sort of interview process out there. You've got a clear selection criteria ready to go. You're able to check all the different references and qualifications to make sure they are who they say they are. You've got your testing phase where you take them in, give them orientation, make sure you're getting feedback back and forth through that. You're testing your process overall, making sure that's working. You're making sure you're checking qualifications and certifications and making sure that everyone has what they're supposed to have to do the job and that you had checked those before you hired them. And then lastly, that you're staying abreast of ongoing changes in the regulations and legislation. If you do all those things and you're making sure that you've got the right people in the right job, life's going to be pretty straightforward. Okay, so really all I can suggest is if you're in a particular industry, look up the industry body that looks after your industry just so you can keep a top level view. Start thinking about the government websites and the government portfolios that deal in your industry as well as looking at employee relations to make sure that you're staying up to date on what relevant awards or entitlements or various acts that might be applicable. Okay, if we're keeping on board with all of that, it does sound fairly complicated. If we are stuck or you are stuck and you're not really sure, there is certainly help out there. There is that opportunity to deal with outsourced recruitment, or recruiting professionals if you need to. You can go through a whole lot of those processes to sort of help yourself or get information. They're there to help or even run the whole process for you if required. As long as you remember the responsibility is yours at the end. Don't give it to them. That's your job, your people, your place. Think about how it's all going to fit in with your organisation and you should be pretty much right. All right, good luck out there. Hiring the right people, getting them on, good job ads, and you should be sweet. Right person, right job every time. Great, have fun.